Welcome everyone, whether you're in the room or watching by recording later. This is Dr. Alana James. Today's conversation is about bibliographic software, otherwise called reference software, and spreadsheets as a way to ease writing. So we will just go ahead and get started. A couple of reflective questions. I'm taking a page from Dr. David Leisure, who spoke a few weeks ago, and there was a lot of really good interaction in that webinar about negative emotional thoughts and positive emotional thoughts and how we can track our lives towards the positive. And I appreciated that. And one of the things we know about professional development is that the more we reflect, the deeper it goes. So I'm going to ask you to think of the last time you felt your drive for graduate school or grit diminished, because all of this goes towards, do we have the right things? Are we in the right place? Are our lives going on? And this actually goes into the next webinar, which I'm doing, which talks specifically to those kind of things, the group that we're doing later. But I'm going to ask about what the circumstance was. And the reason this comes up is because for me, if I'm doing writing, I'm a writer, I'm a researcher and a writer. When I'm doing this kind of work, if I don't have the right tools under me, and I think I'm going to sit down and do 2 hours of working, and I spend the first hour getting something together that wasn't together so I can even proceed, it definitely diminishes my drive for that project. I find it irritating. And I'm thinking that perhaps might be true for some of you. If it is, under your chat box, there's a little hand. Just raise your hand if you've had that experience. We're not having the right tool, definitely got in the way, and was so annoying that the whole thing just felt like it was going south. Let's see if you can respond. Our goals for today are to answer the questions that have come in on the Woo Clap. Thank you, Mary. Have come in on the Woo Clap board, to go over some basic strategies for bibliographic software and spreadsheets as a way to organize writing, and then to discuss those with you in the room and to answer any questions that you have that come up. So don't hesitate. If you're watching and something doesn't make sense or you have a question, to type it in. I will take them as I go. Our agenda, first we're going to do the software part, then the spreadsheets, then we're going to talk about the systems for their use back and forth, and other resources. So bibliographic software. Okay, so if you would type into this one, because I need to know what the range is that we have here. What software are you already using, and does your university require it? If some of you could give me some answers. EndNote is the one that I'm most familiar with. So Tarot, very popular. Medley, yes, I've used that. RefWorks, ProQuest, very good. RefWorks is used. Mendeley. So the big ones. Anybody using any that are not those? So RefWorks not required. Okay, sometimes a university will say you must use one. That's so they can help you with it, because obviously there are probably 35 or 40 different kinds of reference bibliographic softwares now. I have some links in a minute where you can compare them to each other if you're looking for some things that you don't have in the one you're using. a lot of buzz right now that, and I know that other people, when we've had this conversation before, have used one that starts with a C that comes from Europe and have found it very interesting. So there's a lot of reference softwares. Most of the people who've typed in have gone for Zotero, Mendeley, RefWorks. So you're in it already. You're seeing what it does and what it doesn't do. Maybe you're having some problems with it, and you're interested in how you can use it to aid your work in a better way. I think that's what's going on. If you have any other questions, let me know. So then you need to consider, what does your reference software do and what do you need it to do? So the first thing is it needs to import easily from an online library so that your references get up pretty quickly and without too much hassle. Most of us, I think, would need to attach PDFs to it and be able to take notes in the PDF or mark them up in some way. Because later on, like say a couple of years later on, you're not going to remember that article and you're not going to be able to go through it and real quickly see the parts that will jag that memory. And it's handy if that actually attaches to the note. You're going to need to be able to sort the references for multiple uses, and I'll talk about that and how you might choose different kinds of sort groups depending on what kind of writing you're doing. Some of you may do collaborative work. It's more likely in groups and teams in work life probably than dissertation life, when the requirement is very much that you do your own. But you might, when I was supervising for universities, I used to ask people to send me their references so I could see where they were, and they'd send me an EndNote file. So that you might have some collaborative work with your supervisor. Cloud. Some of you need to back up to the cloud because you use multiple devices. Others only need something to work on your own computer. And if you don't actively use a lot of ways to take notes and capture them in your reference software, you're probably not getting the most out of it. Again, from the perspective of an academic who's 15 years past when I took some of these notes, it's annoying to me how few notes I took at some points. And I wish when I went through my reference software, I could look back and I could see the things that I thought were most important from that writer about the work I was doing at the time. So use all the different parts of the database. Look at it carefully, see what it does for you, and see how you might maneuver that for your own outcome. Then I think all of them search online. They may differ in which databases they search. If you're in the United States, and so far everybody that signed in was, then the Library of Congress is a huge opportunity for you to find the names of people who are, that you're reading their journal articles and see what books they've written and what other things they may have done. Easy citation link to the reference so that when you're writing, EndNote has cite while you write. You put in your, I don't use it anymore actually, but I did when I first started. You put in your cursor, you hook it to EndNote, and it brings in the citation and automatically brings in the reference. I don't do that anymore because of the way I use spreadsheets, which will be covered a little later. And so again, everybody has their own style and system. And you'll need to be able to reference in lots of styles, because what you're doing right now, maybe your university requires APA. If you're in Europe, it requires probably Harvard style. But as you write journal articles, you're going to need to be able to switch reference styles. Now, that's the basics. Again, giving you a moment to type, what else do you use your reference software for? So raise your hand if you have something to add. No hands going up. Welcome to the people who came late. We're just starting, so no problem. Okay, and then, so it MLA, good. So you're going for the, that's your style. And then your reference needs to be able to build references in MLA format. So another thing I'd like to see is on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being super easy, how easy would you say your software was to use for the tasks you use it for? So I'd say EndNote is probably a 3.5. Some Zotero users or Medley users, how easy do you find it? 4.5, excellent. Excellent. So that's a Medley vote, that's a 5. And Sarah Zotero, 4.5. But not everybody that uses those tools finds them as easily. So a little bit of challenge then. And I think also how easy you find the tool depends on which database you're using it in. So if you're hooked through your university to a STEM database and that's your area of research and literature, then those databases are probably hooked into being able to get their references, citations easily to your reference pretty early. I would think that you might have an easier time than people who were studying some of the more challenging areas. It may be that the whole world is caught up to hooking to each other, but it also may be that the API between the database and your software has some hookage issues. What I find is that I just have small tolerance for figuring out why it isn't working. And when it doesn't work, I just open up a new sheet and I just type it in because it takes me less time to type a few in than it does to necessarily figure out the database hooks. So some people, I'm sure, are here because you're starting fresh. It's clearly one of the people who sent in a question the question was, what bibliographic software is the easiest to use? And I've given you the first 2 links are some university comparison guides, and they focus on Zotero, Medley, EndNote, and RefWorks. The last one focuses on all of them and literally has an icon for 30 different kinds of reference management tools. And then you can see which tools you want to compare. Because what I've hoped you've gathered from this is that each of us as a researcher has our own needs for how these tools work. So what works for me may not be working for you. And then I don't know if you're yet members of ResearchGate.net. I recommend it. It's one of the 2 best social environments for educators and researchers. And they had a really good post where different researchers talked about why they use their tools. So if you're just starting, you might want to spend a few minutes going through those to see if that helps you make your decision. And the reason making your decision is important is because once you get, it's like a marriage. Once you get one of these things and it's got hundreds of your references in it, you're not going to easily switch software. So figure out a little bit ahead of time what you need it to do. All right, now we're moving then into the second tool we're talking about, which is spreadsheets, used for non-numeric reasons. So please raise your hand if you use spreadsheets for capturing data, for organizing your literature, for anything that's non-numeric. I'll give people a minute. Saying welcome to the people who have joined us since we started. It's a big group today. Is anybody in the room using spreadsheets for non-numeric reasons? No hands are going up. Well, all right, then some good ideas to be giving you, because this can significantly cut down your time when you're writing. So what do I do? And you'll see how I do it in a minute. What do I like about it? I like the fact that it gives me an organized way to track how I'm transferring ideas from other people to my work. And I'll say more about that and the thought process behind that as I go. And what recommends its use is the fact that you can sort. So the fact that a spreadsheet sorts two ways is absolutely brilliant, and will help your organization, or has helped my organization as I've written for a very long time. So I looked up spreadsheets for literature review as a search because I was interested in how other people use it. I found a couple of links, which I'll share in a second. And clearly, some people were using it very differently than I was. So I thought I'd go check. And when I did a search that included notes on it, I got a lot, a typical Google image type page full of screen captures of how people were using the columns. And it's the power of using a spreadsheet as you write is how you set up your columns for yourself. So again, it's very personal. It's kind of how you think, what you think is important. The typical ones were date, although that has little or no meaning to me. Then author, I would say you would want definitely your first column should be the full reference, not just the author. Theoretical components might be a column you might search under. The methodology you might search under, and lots of other things. So let's see how other people do it. These slides are in your handouts, so you can click there on the references that I've given you. So Grad Hacker wrote a good article on organizing your literature spreadsheet, was published actually in the Inside Higher Ed magazine, and suggested these columns, which I was very intrigued by. Now they use an ID number. That would be any kind of number that will help you sort things later back to where they were, which is a useful idea. I just put one box, and that box is the references. This person puts them all out separately, I guess, so that they can see easily their years. APA references is its own box. Each of these are columns. Type of resource, whether it was a journal or not, again, doesn't matter in my writing, but perhaps they're pulling, it might matter if you were doing a lit review and you wanted to cluster, because remember, you're using your columns for clustering. So if you wanted to cluster your resources in journal articles and then books on your subject or something like that, rather than by topic, it might be useful to understand what type of a resource it was. Abstract keywords, to notice if you liked one, especially to go back to see the keywords. This is somebody using a spreadsheet pretty much with a lot of the things in it that I use my reference software for. So you don't have to do things twice, is my way of feeling about using tools. I set up my reference software to carry out ongoing year after year for all of my academic career list. And then I use a spreadsheet for a particular targeted piece of writing that I'm doing right now. But it's interesting here to have what kind of methodology it is. That might be something if you're doing, all of these are things you could also have in your lower notes section of your reference software. And hopefully there's some good ideas for you. I'll show you what I do. First off, I've done a long webinar just on this, so that's the link at the top. But now, picture, if you will, in your head, a Excel spreadsheet. The reference is column A. Column B is what I call the focus or point of the article, book, whatever. What this author said that was intriguing enough, good enough to add to my body of work. Then I separate the rest of it into columns that have to do with what I'm writing. So if I'm writing a journal article, it's going to be background, methodology, finding or data information, data collection, and analysis information, findings, conclusion, discussion. If I'm writing a book, then each chapter is going to have a column. And if that's going to get kind of messy, so once I have a pretty good idea of my subheadings in the chapters, I'll separate it that way. And then I take my references, and I will have sorted my references into groups, which I probably didn't put enough attention to when we did the slides on references. So as I'm doing my references in EndNote, I have groups, and I make a lot of groups. I make groups that are generic. Most of my research is about PhD completion, about professional development, topics like that. So those are big groups. But if I'm writing, I will make groups that are these same columns. And I will go through my references in the big group. I will slot them into the columns. Then I will come here to my spreadsheet, and I will copy and paste my references into the first one. I see where I'm going. I put in boxes of information in the spreadsheet. The main ideas that author said that I want to include in that section. Then the brilliance of this is that when I'm ready to write, I just click on that column, sort to the top, and there is a running list of all the ideas I want to make. And from then I can sort and organize my writing. I have never found anything that takes a large body of work, such as a dissertation or heavens, a full academic career, and knocks it into a way that works. So systems. Here's mine written out so you can think about it and then decide for yourself how it goes. So when I'm reading, I read critically. What I mean by that is I am reading for a purpose. How am I going to use this? Does it add or support or deny or take me in a different direction? What is its purpose to me? And that's what goes in that B column. Then I have an ongoing reference library. That has been EndNotes for 15 years. I find something I like. I download the PDF, and then I put it up in the reference. In that reference, I get my reference set up. I attach the PDF. import the citation, do all of that. And then I highlight what I liked in the EndNote PDF file. So it's there. And I copy and paste things from the EndNote PDF file into my database, specifically the abstract. But sometimes I'll make notes, methodological notes. Somebody did something I thought was interesting. I'm always looking from the position of my body of work and how does this idea take me in a new direction, or what might I want to come back to? Those are the ideas that get lost so easily. And then I pull a group. So it's either into, as I said, a generic group, or it's into a specific group, because right now I'm updating my database because I'm looking for new things that will add to my work because I'm writing an article. That's what happens when I read, all of those kind of thoughts. So as you can see, I've taken the reading, I've dissected it, and I've sorted it into a mechanism that works for me. And however we do that, that's what we need to do, is to figure out how we're going to sort, what are the sort mechanisms for your brain, and what's worked in the past, what might work better. And then when you write, I start the spreadsheet to organize my ideas. As I said, column A is always the reference, the full reference. Column B is always the idea that really struck me from that piece, the importance of their writing to me. And then the rest of the columns have to do with the headings of what I'm doing. Okay. I'm going to raise your hand if you have questions, because those two things together. Adrian has mentioned that keeping all the relative research notes in one place for handy retrievals. That's it. For me, it always goes back. Handy retrievals, year after year, have been my reference library. So endnotes, lower fields, the longer I've worked with some of these references, the more notes they've had. Oh, and some of you have used spreadsheets. Good. It'd be interesting to see if you use them in this kind of a way. Oh, what Adrian does is extract certain text highlighted in a reference, along with my own thoughts and comments, into a doc file, into a Microsoft Word file, and then reorganize the idea into trees using the navigation pane. Yes, that's my third step, Adrian. Once I've got my basic ideas here, because sometimes things add up. So in a spreadsheet, you might have 3 or 4 authors who said basically the same thing. Or you took those 3 or 4 authors and you made one clump of a new idea out of it. So your writing is going to be the clump. So when I go from here to Word, then I have my navigation pane set up. My navigation pane is set up with the same headings I've used in my spreadsheet. And I open a heading, I look at all the things in the column, and I build my subcolumns or my points. And then from the, I think I'd call it kind of a collapsed version of all the notes in the spreadsheet. Then I see where my ideas go and whether it's hitting my funnel correctly. I do those back and forths a few times before I actually write much. Because the more I think, the faster my writing goes. Isn't it time consuming to write in spreadsheets after adding the references in Bitfile? A lot of people think so. And I don't. The reason I don't is because the spreadsheet has a target that has to go to writing, but what Adrian does would be something else you could certainly try. we are all thinkers in a million ways, and we will all come up with them differently. All we can do is just present ideas, and some will stick for some of you and not for others. I don't mind the time thinking. I think that's part of it. I enjoy the writing process, and so I give myself a period of where I can really get some writing done. And then the more I think, the better my writing. And also, another thing that I've talked about in other times is I dictate my writing when I actually write. So it's useful for me to have all the ideas easily in a spreadsheet, and then do the first dictations. Monica asks, when you use spreadsheets, isn't it difficult and time consuming to view everything in the cells? Okay, it isn't, because you sort, Monica. If it's overwhelming feeling, then you need more columns. So for a dissertation, you'd probably need chapter 1, background, other things. And then you may cut and paste one idea into several cells. So it's part of your background, but it's also something you want to use in your problem statement. So it's my way, at least when I use it, of backing up what's going to go where when I write. So I don't mind cutting in. I write in, type in something in a cell, I copy it, and then I see how many other cells it should go in on that column. It all becomes brilliant when you sort, because then you're only looking at one column at a time. And all of that overwhelm that is the vision of the spreadsheet goes away, and you just have that single focus, and that works for me. Yeah, so you can either ignore what it looks like, or you can't. I can easily ignore it. I'm either working on the rows or I'm working in the columns, and the rest of the spreadsheet goes away from me. I have an example of a spreadsheet that I've done. If I'll look at the end, I think it's in the references. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's in the references that I have at the back. But if not, yes, there's one that goes, I also have referenced the previous webinar I did that was all just about spreadsheets, and there's an example with that. Okay, any other questions? We may be finishing early. Let me look. Okay, so let me see at the ones I've got. So organizing your graduate stuff and use of is a video, and PDF, research design. It's a PDF I'm looking for, and I'm not sure it's here. Well, you have questions, type them in, please, and I will go find that PDF for you. Actually, you might want this too. This one is a previous conversation. And I think it's here. if you're ever looking for very concrete kinds of things, if you go to, this is our open educational resource site, and we have a tag called Hacks and Tools, and it's where I stash checklists and things that I find personally useful. I think that PDF might be the one. Let me open the link and see. No, that's the... Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it up in the handouts. Pretty sure I found it for somebody. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any new ones coming in. Thank you for your patience. Oh, no, it was a different one. Well, okay. So here's what I'm going to do with that last question. I'm going to find my last version of a spreadsheet, which is very messy, very overwhelming. You'll see how many sheets it has and how many different articles it's covered. And I will put it up on the OER site and send you all the link with the when I publish this. So you always get an email that says that the video has been published, and in that, I'm sure a lot of you just kind of let it go by, but there will be the link that you're looking for in that. Do you advise using it? I use Excel. I use Microsoft products over the years, but I'm in a PC environment. So if you're in an Apple environment, then of course you have different tools. But I found I used to hate Microsoft, and I used Open for a long time. After a while, it just became easier not to have to save as, not to have to remember that the rest of the world is using a different tool. And I really quite like Microsoft 365, Office 365. In fact, next week, we're having a conversation about all the tools that go with it, because they have really made my life as a writer easier. Thank you for that question. It's a good question. What else can I do to help? As you're writing, I just want to remind you that there's this survey, surveymonkey.com/r/web experience. Would really appreciate you saying how this was for you, giving us some ratings. We are constantly watching to move that dial towards it is going to help you with your dissertation. So if it doesn't, and you have any comments about it, please never hesitate to ask. No problem. Happy to have you, and look forward to seeing you again. Anybody has anything ever to tell me about our work or how we can improve it, I'm here. I'm at alana@drlnet.com. So if there are no more questions, I'm happy to hang out and answer. I'll turn off the recording. Thank you, everybody who watched by recording, the other 300 of you. So I hope this was useful.